May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please have a seat. Dear Bishop Gates, I wrote in my December 2021 Ember Day letter, good news. I can add snake handler to my resume. Granted, it was only a baby snake, but it was in my kitchen, and I did handle it, albeit with kitchen tongs. Many classmates have reminded me that baby snakes do not come alone. Thankfully, I've not seen any of its siblings or parents. Biblical scholar and professor at Lutheran Seminary, Joy J. Moore, said in her commentary on today's Old Testament reading, I'm a Genesis woman, and I have a healthy and well-placed fear of snakes. I'm with Dr. Moore on this. I don't like snakes at all. Unfortunately, the orientation materials I received from the seminary in Sewanee, Tennessee, did not include the bits about the prevalence of copperheads and rattlesnakes on the mountain. Although perhaps if I had known, I might not have transferred there. One might well imagine my reaction when, upon receiving the preaching rota and reviewing the readings, I realized that I got the snakes. Sometimes it helps, however, to put things in perspective. I live happily in New York City. The trains that I take to get to St. Luke's are almost always on time, and I'm not wandering aimlessly about unless I mean to do that. Not so for the Israelites. These poor folks have been wandering for quite a while, traveling a circuitous route that, had they walked in a straight line from start to finish, would have taken 2, maybe 3 weeks. But that's not really the point here. They were being tested. They were hungry and tired. They were bored of eating the weird bread called manna that appeared every morning with the dew. Can't you just hear the whining and kvetching? Are we there yet? When are we going to be there? I don't want to walk anymore. You don't love us. If you did, you would have things to eat and drink. Can we stop and get a Happy Meal? Okay, maybe not that last part, but you get the idea. And God, being God, and as a parent, I can certainly relate to this, he doesn't soften, give in, or give them the ancient world equivalent of the Happy Meal. Nope, God sends them poisonous snakes. Bold move, God. Kind of the divine, I'll give you something to cry about. And it did the trick. The Israelites snapped out of their whining and tantrums. They confessed their bratty behavior to Moses and asked him to intercede on their behalf. So does God answer Moses' prayer and remove the plague of snakes? Nope. God says, yeah, they don't like the snakes, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to make a snake out of bronze and stick it on a stick and wrap it around and raise it up high. Whenever somebody gets bitten, tell them to look at the snake on a stick and they won't die from the snake bite. Sounds reasonable. Seems a bit extreme at first until we realize 2 things. First, the snake on the pole reminds them that they have sinned by speaking against the Lord and against Moses, that they brought this on themselves. And second, that following God's instructions given to them by Moses requires faith and requires a buy-in from the people. God could have just banished the snakes, but God didn't do that. God made it possible for the Israelites to have some agency over their own saving. This is a significant story, so significant that Jesus chooses this one to refer to when he's having a conversation with Nicodemus in the 3rd chapter of John's Gospel. Nicodemus was a Pharisee, a prominent leader, and he snuck out during the dark of night to go find Jesus and ask him all the questions. He was drawn to Jesus. He doesn't quite get what Jesus is saying in their first meeting, But we do see him 2 more times later in John's Gospel, during which he gradually catches on and becomes a follower. But that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. In the passage that we have today, Jesus compares himself to that snake on a stick. The serpent was lifted up, and so must the Son of Man be lifted up. Surely Jesus doesn't see himself as a snake. Of course not. But he does know what is going to happen to him, and there are parallels. In the wilderness, the Israelites were tormented, a direct result of their sin. That snake on a stick was a visible reminder of their behavior. Jesus, when he was lifted up on the cross, was also a visible reminder of sin, but not his sin. He was a reminder to the people of their sin, the atrocities, the torture, the slights, the evil done by people against each other. The man Jesus was without guilt, without sin. The riled-up crowd had called for his death, knowing that he was not guilty of anything. In the modern world, we know of evil. We speak of evil at varied levels of understanding. And every so often, that evil comes out of the darkness and into the light. We react with anger and outrage. We call for changes. We wear clothes that represent the latest horror. Matthew Shepard was a gay man, tortured and killed just for being who he was. His death brought homophobia into the light in a stronger way than ever before. There were tributes and protests, support for his internment in the National Cathedral. Yet more and more laws are being passed in this country that make even protecting anyone who is LGBTQIA illegal. Their lives are in danger. George Floyd, a black man whose very public death at the hands of the police brought both racial discrimination and police brutality into the light. Yeah, we all knew it was there, but we didn't see it, so it was easy not to think about it. Outrage, protests, Black Lives Matter, calls for the end of racial profiling, body cameras on law enforcement personnel. Sandy Hook, Covenant School in Nashville, Colorado Springs, the Marjorie Stedman High School, Columbine, schools, movie theaters, gas stations, nightclubs, and on and on and on. Mass shootings happen on average about once a day in this country. One would think that after so many small children were killed in Sandy Hook, something would change. There were protests, tributes, hearings, thoughts, and prayers. There are so many shootings that I actually own an orange stole that I'm to wear whenever there is a shooting. I hope I never need to wear it, but the odds are not in my favor. School children not only have fire drills, they practice school shooter drills, lockdowns. They're in that classroom looking around, trying to figure out what they can grab to save themselves and save their classmates. I had my first shooter drill, active shooter drill, a couple weeks ago. I had a classroom of 5th graders. There was no place to hide. There was no safe place. It was windows and doors. And I had 17 kids in my charge. And 10-year-olds don't stop talking. That's hard. And they were scared. With the 24-hour news cycle and constant access to devices, students face pressures that none of us have ever known as civilians in this country. These evils happen over and over and over and over. The biggest of them are brought into the light. We see them, we protest, we weep. I see that some people are changed and thus compelled to fight. But the grassroots efforts of many have, the grassroots efforts of many have made a huge difference. But is it enough? Doesn't seem to be. What will bring us all to pray with our action and not just our words? What's it going to take? Jesus was lifted up on that cross at high noon on that Friday, broad daylight. How will each of us see him and respond? Amen.